Very good morning, everybody. Dear distinguished speakers, participants, Chairman and Founder Marat Terterov, dear Nadezhda. It's a great pleasure to say honestly, it's without, as Marat said, any exaggeration. Today event is really important for Uzbekistan, I believe, for our energy sector. And I'm more than pleased to have such a solid audience. And I would like to, at the very beginning, to say words of appreciation and special thanks to, again, to founder of Brussels Energy Club, Dr Marat Terterov, and Director Nadezhda Kokotovich. And my welcome words also to the head of the Department of Energy and Infrastructure from the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade, and our key speaker today of Republic of Uzbekistan, Mr. Aziz Khamidov, his fellow colleagues, Chief Specialist of Investment Division of very said Ministry, Mr. Shokhrukh Abdukakhkharov, and Head of the Investment Division of the Department of Energy, Geology, and Chemicals and Infrastructural Sector Development of the Ministry, Mr. Bahodir Husanov. I would like to underline that these gentlemen and professionals, they represent new generation of reformist government under the presidency of our leader Shavkat Mirziyoyev. And you know, Uzbekistan is undergoing tremendous reformist path and development in terms of social, economic, and political transformation. So, but before giving the floor to my colleagues from the Tashkent, I would like also to brief you on some figures and shed the light on what is going on in terms of diversification of our energy sector. Today event is rather very important for Uzbekistan. You know, generally speaking, Uzbekistan is a rich country in many ways. We are producing a lot of mineral resources like gold, uranium, rare metals. But there are also some specific rankings. For example, in the energy sector, we are 24th in the world by gas reserves, and we about 13th country by its production. One of the major projects today is a plan to the production of gas to liquid fuel, which is supposed to be built by the end of this year. This project should produce at the end 1.5 million tons of high quality GTL fuel that meets the requirements of the European standard, Euro 5. And it will be achieved potentially through the annual processing of 3.6 billion cubic meters of natural gas. And along this progress, and that was quite well mentioned in the introductory remarks by Dr. Terterov, we're still facing a lot of untapped potential in terms of renewable energy. And once again, I would like to thank that Brussels Energy Club specifically chosen this very important topic, which is actual and acute not only for Uzbekistan but also for the region. And I would like to say that our government and firmly believe that renewable energy could become the prime sector of Uzbek energy in coming years. And with that in mind, the President of Uzbekistan, Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev, stressed the importance of moving forward greater use of the renewable energy in the strategy for actions on the development of Uzbekistan in years 2017-2021. Recently, we received also requests from our capital to provide new ideas for the next national development plan, and we again included as the embassy and submitted our idea that the renewable energies should, and energy sector, generally speaking, should stay at the focus area and overall economic development of our country. So, but the renewable energy law that was approved last year, May 22nd, provides and opens the way for the comprehensive regulation of our renewable energy sector. It's the first ever legal document that regulates and opened the door for potential investments in that sector in our country. So by and large, Uzbekistan has set a goal to increase the amount of renewable energy sector in total electricity production of increased and to put up to 25% by year 2030. Today it's merely 10%. And to achieve these results, the state is and the government of Uzbekistan, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade taking active measures to implement major projects with the foreign investment and technology transfer. The construction of new renewable energy facilities with a total capacity of nearly 11 gigawatt and the modernization of existing hydropower plants should ensure the production from renewable energy at a level of more than 37 terawatt hours, as well as savings of more than 8.1 billion of cubic meters of natural gas. And it should also worth to mention that along with renewables, the demand for electricity is also increasing in our country. You know, Uzbekistan's with population of 35 million people and quite a booming economy with a lot of new projects. We're very hungry for energy, and today, for example, the demand for electricity is about 69 billion kilowatt hours. The country produces in total about 64 billion kilowatt hours of electricity. So, and according to the calculations and experts, by 2030, the demand for electricity will almost double and will amount to 125 billion cubic kilowatt hours. So in our process and quest for transformation and liberalization of our economy, we are also working closely with different partners. Among them, traditional ones is international financial institutions and development banks. Just to name a few of them, it's like World Bank, Asian Development Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Recently, we also paved the way for the rapid engagement with European Investment Bank. And complex of measures being taken also in terms of implement those projects with the support of these banks, but more importantly with the direct foreign investment. And I would like also to mention that this year alone, Uzbekistan has signed a number of projects. Two of them were signed April this year, and I will just name a few of them. With Aqua Power from Saudi Arabia, 3 agreements worth over $2 billion were signed, and one of them is a wind power plant with the capacity up to 1,000 megawatts, and the second one is 1,500 megawatts combined cycle gas turbine power plant. Another one is also with the not the company, but the fund from United Arab Emirates is Masdar, construction of 500 megawatt wind power plant in Navai region. We also, it must be interesting for the audience, especially from the EU member states, from the Europe. Uzbekistan signed with Total Iran from France, construction of 100 megawatt solar power station in Samarkand region. There are great interest from different actors and companies from Turkey, and one of them is AXA Power, construction of combined cycle gas power plant with capacity up to 140 megawatt in Tashkent region. So among the legislative basis and the documentation regulating our renewable energy sector, generally speaking, the energy sector, was a concept note for the ensuring electricity supply in Uzbekistan for years 2020 and 2030. And this document provides priority measures aimed to modernize and reconstruct existing power plants, improvement of electricity metering system, development of renewable energy sources, especially the solar energy. And I think it would be very interesting to discuss throughout today's meeting this particular document and its basis. So in order to increase the attraction of foreign direct investment, the renewable energy sector in our country is building up based on the tenders and auctions, and that should be held in conjunction with international financial institutions to determine investors based on the build, own, operate model. And it envisaged that this will be done on long-term contracts basis lasting up to 25 years. There are some regions in our country that are particularly of interest for business, but also in preferential basis within our economic development plans. I just will name a few of them: Jizak, Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashkadarya, Surkhandarya regions, the abundance of solar and wind. But for example, today in the morning, I was having the video conference call with the Deputy Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan Autonomous Republic, and Mr. Kazakbekov, he just confirmed, I was inviting him to speak today, but he just confirmed that indeed Kyrgyzstan, which is accounting for almost quarter of our total territory of the country, is ready to afford and to provide all the necessary help to any potential investor who is willing to build some renewable energy projects in that particular region. So I'm almost at the end of my introductory remarks, and I would like just to underline what was said at the beginning by Dr. Terterov, that Uzbekistan is indeed a party to the Paris Agreement, and we are seeking the common goal of greenhouse gas emission mitigating, and government also expecting that developing of renewable energy resources will help us in that process and reduce the emissions by 10% by year 2030 compared to 2010. So thank you all. It was a little bit of monologue from my side, but once again, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to this distinguished audience, and I would like to give the floor back to Dr. Terterov. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ambassador Khakimov. That was actually quite a useful sort of intervention in itself, that speech, because you lead quite nicely into the presentations that will follow. And you also you know, indirectly, you really raise some key questions here in terms of the greater demand for electricity that we are seeing in Uzbekistan. I mean, people maybe sometimes forget, although I think this is a relatively specialized audience familiar with Central Asia, familiar with Uzbekistan, and you know, you are the most populous country in Uzbekistan, at around about 35 million. I think when I first visited in 1997, I think we were at about 25, 26. You can correct me, and Aziz and our colleagues will correct my figures for the population back then. But the growth of the population, the growth of the economy, the capital formation in the country, which now is being, I would say, substantially assisted by the wider process of economic reforms, okay? Because we're talking about energy today, we're talking about, you know, the energy mix and renewables, gas, but this has a wider context. Uzbekistan is going through a process of economic reforms and liberalization, and the objective is to, you know, to further stimulate the sort of the economy. And these are going to be, I think, some questions that will come to Aziz and his team, Bahodir Shokhrukh, because on the one hand, you know, you're locked into these commitments on climate, on, you know, energy transition, international partnerships, commitments. But then on the other hand, you have to keep fueling the economy. You have to keep, you know, the power on. You have to keep the, you know, the younger population, which is growing inexorably in Uzbekistan, sort of at bay. So I think you open really some key sort of issues, which now I will transfer for the details of those issues to be discussed by our colleagues from Tashkent. And I should also say that the Ministry of Investments and Foreign Trade in Uzbekistan, I don't know if people have been, have looked at their website or are familiar with the ministry, but this is really a key state structure for all those issues that Dilyor Khakimov and myself have just raised in our introductions, because this is the state structure which actually deals with foreign investment, FDI, and it's a state structure that deals with foreign trade. Okay, so whereas you have other state structures that deal with, investments that go from the state budget into the development of the domestic economy and domestic assets, the people that are going to be addressing this audience now are actually dealing with international trade, international investment. And I think this is really key for the renewables part of the discussion. It's also important for gas as well, but for renewables in particular, because, Uzbekistan is really, interdependent, I would say, on international partnerships for development of the RES, the renewable energy side of the energy economy. So without further ado, let me now give the floor to, I believe there's going to be a dual presentation here from our friends Aziz Khamidov and Shokhrukh Abdukakhkharov, who are both joining us from Tashkent, of course. And Aziz has actually been around for quite a while. He's worked with us at the Energy Charter for a while, at the Secretariat of the Energy Charter Treaty in Brussels, some years ago now, in fact. And since those days in the, around 2008, 2009, Aziz actually really developed a great amount of experience actually working in the projects, doing deals, I think some people maybe in America would say, working for, consultancies that work with the IFIs. I mean, there's a lot of money that's been coming into Uzbekistan over the last 10 years from the international lenders, the donors, the World Banks, and the Asia Development Bank, and these sort of IFI structures, IFC. But I think he's now moved on into an important position in the government, in the state structures, in the bureaucracy that works with foreign capital. So he has developed really experience, which is now being transferred into day-to-day planning, project management, and the big projects, the big renewable energy projects, which we're going to hear about now. And his colleague Shokhrukh is ably assisting him and actually talking to the investors, talking to the Mubadalas and the Mazdars and, the Totals and, these sort of players from Europe and from the Gulf region. So I think we have a kind of a rare opportunity to hear from, really primary sources, people involved in the game in Uzbekistan. So Aziz, Shokhrukh, the floor is yours. I will bring up your presentation. I'll bring up the renewable energy slides now, and then you can introduce the topic and then talk us through, and I'll move the slides for you as we speak. Okay. So let me just see where we have your presentation. This, I see the gas one. Okay, let me just renewable energy in Uzbekistan. Okay. Up. Okay, so let me just bring up your presentation. 1 second, just bear with me. Okay, so there's the gas presentation. 1 second. Ah, here it is. Renewable energy in Uzbekistan. Okay, so you should be able to see the presentation now. So Aziz, over to you.
Good afternoon, dear distinguished colleagues, Dr. Terterov, Ambassador Khakimov, dear friends. It's my great honor and pleasure to have this opportunity to meet with you and to present energy sector reforms with my colleagues in Uzbekistan, with special focus on renewables and gas. We will start with renewables. And could you go to the next slide?
Yep. One second. Okay, can you see that? Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, we've gone to the there it is. Yep, go ahead.
Uzbekistan has entered a fast-paced, wide-ranging reform path immediately after the President Mirziyoyev took office as president back in October 2016. Uzbekistan efforts, in launching a large-scale restructuring program in energy sector is well known. Uzbekenergo, as the state-owned power monopoly, was unbundled to electricity generation, transmission, and distribution companies, and the Ministry of Energy was established as a regulator. You can see on the right side of the slide that what are the developments recently been launched together with the international financial institutions. We are working now on the concept of introducing electricity market models and transition stages identified together with the experts from the World Bank, ADB, and the EBRD. We're developing the new electricity law. Also, the electricity grid code is expected to be adopted by the end of the year. We're also developing we have developed with the Ministry of Energy the concept for the energy generation up to 2030. And a lot of work is being implemented for the transition to the IEC standards. Well, I would like to give now the floor to my colleague Shokhrukh Abdukakhkharov, who will tell you in details about the projects in the renewable sector in Uzbekistan, which is being implemented under, I would say, his guidance. Shokhrukh is a very experienced specialist in dealing with the renewables project. Shokhrukh, I give the floor to you. Please go ahead.
Hi everyone, thank you so much, Aziz. I would like to go to the next slide where we could in detail, first of all, see the goal of the government to introduce renewable energy up to 2030. As was mentioned previously in the previous slide, the government approved a concept of the generation development up to 2030. And according to that concept, the government has a very ambitious goals to introduce 5 gigawatts of solar power generation until 2030 and 3 gigawatts of wind power generation, with hydropower being introduced until 2030, equal to 1.8 gigawatt of the generation facilities. And now, continuing that, I would like to go more in detail to the projects that we already are implementing and planning to implement in the future and now in Uzbekistan. If we could move to the next slide. So the first successful precedents that we finalized, the first one was the deal that we closed last year with Masdar to develop first in Uzbekistan IPP tender solar power station with 100 megawatt capacity. And that deal was done with the assistance of IFC. We structured a tender process based on the template that was developed by IFC called Scaling Solar, and that was very successfully introduced in African countries. The result of the tender was very successful. We could achieve one of the lowest tariffs in emerging markets, which was equal to 2.67 USD cents per kilowatt hour. I can now confirm that we are already there with financial close. The big work was done, and we are aiming to reach the financial close and sign the financing agreements with lenders next week. So we are almost there, and therefore we will be able already to start the construction and hopefully to reach the COD of the power plant next year in the third quarter. This was the first project. Taking into consideration the success that we reached with IFC, the government decided to scale up the program, Scaling Solar, and now we are implementing with IFC the second phase, which consists of 2 tendering deals, each 200 megawatt solar power plants in Samarkand and Jizak region. We received a big interest from developers, and you can see the numbers. For the RFQ stage, we have received applications from 18 different developers from different countries, which vary starting from Middle East and ending the Europe and Africa. Now we are in the process of evaluation, and hopefully we are aiming to start the RFP process on December and sign the commercial agreements with bidders in the first quarter of 2021. Moreover, as a perspective project, we are planning to also implement the third phase of the Scaling Solar program, which is to happen in 2021, in the second quarter of 2021, by introducing another 2 tenders, 300 megawatt in Bukhara region and 200 megawatt in Namangan region, which will be done similar to the first and second tender deals. If we move to the next slide. Moreover, we decided to diversify the approach that is introduced to develop the solar power plants by attracting the ADB also as a consultant to implement the solar power plant tender deals in Uzbekistan. The approach will be different, so therefore we will be able to see how investors react to documents which are structured differently relatingly to the risk allocation. With ADB, we structure the documents more, let's say, in different way, providing more support for the investors. And we also already started the tender by initiating the tender for the construction of 100 megawatt solar power plant in Surkhandarya region. The project already started. We also already issued RFQ and we received 12 applications from different investors from different countries. The same as with IFC tender project, we are now in the process of evaluation and aiming to launch the RFP in the December this year, with the goal of signing the commercial agreements with the winning developer in the first quarter on 2021. Moreover, as a perspective project, we agreed with ADB that we scale up their program and will do the next phase of it on 2021, second quarter, with introducing additional 300 megawatts of solar power plants just near the first project in the same location in Surkhandarya region. So, and if we go to the next slide, this was for the solar power plants, which are being now tendered with the help of our IFIs. On the other hand, we are implementing now, with the help of EBRD, the tender deal to construct 100 megawatt wind power plant in Kazakhstan Republic. We already launched an RFQ. For now, we have received 70 applications from different companies. Maybe I can give an example. Such companies include the big developers such as Total-Eren, NL Group, Aqua Power, Masdar, and different other big companies, which are very interested in participating in this first wind powered plant tender deal. And at the moment, we are evaluating their applications and will be able to issue the RFP, which is the next stage, on January 2021, with the goal of determining the winning bidder and signing the commercial agreements in the second quarter of 2021. This is the plan. Moreover, as a perspective project and to meet our ambitious goals of the approved concept for 2030, we decided to scale up our project for the next year by initiating just nearby the first one, additional 200 megawatt wind power capacities with the same approach. If we go to the next slide, these were the tender deals that are now on place in Uzbekistan. Now I would like to mention to you the projects which were signed with different developers from different countries on bilateral basis. So these are the projects with Total-Eren, where we signed the power purchase agreement with them to develop 100 megawatt solar power plant in Samarkand region. I can tell you that the construction already started, and we are almost there with reaching the financial close and signing the loan agreements with lenders, which is going to happen on December 2020, so in 1 month, hopefully. The next one is the project with our friends that already won the first tender deal, Masdar, to develop 500 megawatt wind power plant, which is going to be one of the biggest wind power plants in the Republic, not only in the Republic, but in the world, where Masdar will develop, finance, construct, and operate the biggest wind power plant in Uzbekistan. The commercial documents were signed, and we are now in the process of reaching the financial close and in the process of negotiating the transaction with the potential lenders. The construction of the wind power plant is planned to start next year, first quarter 2021. At the same time, we initiated the negotiations with another very reputable and big company from Saudi Arabia, Aqua Power, to develop 1 gigawatt of wind power plants, which are divided into two in Bukhara region, in Navai and Bukhara region. There will be 2 power plants, 500 megawatt in Navai and 1 gigawatt and 500 megawatt in Bukhara. So totally 1 gigawatt. We are aiming to sign the commercial agreements, the PPA, by the end of the year, and the plan to start the construction is the December of the next year, taking into consideration the negotiations which are essential with lenders to reach the financial close and start the construction. So in general, these are the projects that we are now doing with the help of our private companies, and we believe that by diversifying the energy generation capacities in Uzbekistan, we will be able to introduce first renewable energy, we will be able to achieve the lowest possible tariffs, and moreover, we will be able, the most important for the government advantage, to reduce the gas consumption for the energy generation. If we go to the next slide now. Yep, so therefore, thank you so much for presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we will be only pleased to answer to all of them.
Thank you, Shokhrukh and Aziz, for that kind of succinct kind of overview of the objectives of the government with respect to renewable energy in Uzbekistan, as well as you know, a nice, sharp, succinct sort of overview of some of the key projects. Now we have another quite substantial, in fact, presentation to offer the audience on gas. But just before we move there, I just want to pause and see if people want to come in with any, you know, kind of comments or questions that are maybe urgently, or not necessarily urgently, but you would like to raise. I mean, for me, one question is, well, one, where are we with the legislative base for all of this? Has that been, you know, in place for some time, the relevant legislation to you know, attract and protect foreign investment? We do, of course, know that Uzbekistan is a contracting party to the Energy Charter Treaty, so you have a default, you know, legal instrument which covers all foreign investment from other Energy Charter Treaty source countries. And of course, I note that countries from the Gulf are not necessarily, well, they're not members of the Energy Charter Treaty. And then there's also a question of, you know, tariffs, because that tariff that you pointed to, very low. I was quite amazed in terms of the investor returns on that. I'd be interested in knowing how, you know, that would be attractive to investors, because quite often, you know, in Europe, we've seen with solar energy projects in countries like Ukraine, we've seen with solar energy projects that, you know, government has introduced these feed-in tariff sort of systems where the tariffs are probably artificially high at the conception phase of the economic activity and investor incentive activity. But then in the longer run, this is not sustainable. But you seem to have a very low tariff. But that's just some thoughts that I have. But would anyone like to come in with some thoughts? Please just you know, raise your hand either physically, or you've got the raise hand feature in the in your Zoom menu at the bottom of the screen. So would anyone like to come in on the first presentation and raise a question or make a comment, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. Do you hear me?
Matteo, I believe that is, yeah?
Indeed, indeed.
Welcome, Matteo. Welcome. It's
Thank you very
nice
much.
to hear you. Matteo is from the DG Energy at the European Commission, of course, and he, in fact, covers Uzbekistan and Central Asia for DG Energy. So, Matteo, please do come in. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marat, and thank you very much for a very interesting presentation we just heard. I just have a couple of questions. I hope I'm not leading to any repetition. I missed the beginning of this event, but the questions are the following. The first one, if you could explain me a bit better the respective roles of the newly created Ministry of Energy versus the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade in basically engineering and triggering all these contracts and projects on capacity generation or renewable energy, because I understand the PPA agreements are signed and the commercial agreement for all these projects are signed by the Ministry of Investment and Foreign Trade. You said that the Ministry of Energy is the regulator. I would like just to understand let's say, for example, why the Ministry of Energy is not also directly involved in the commercial agreements with for the construction of the new renewable energy generation capacity? That would be the first question. And the second one, just if you can confirm me that I understand correctly that, so basically there are two sets of projects. One is basically done via auctions and tendering, like you have explained to us. And the second set is just done via direct bilateral contracts with Masdar and with Total RN. Did I understand correctly that there were these two different approaches used? Thank you very much.
So, Aziz, you want to come in on Matteo's questions?
I think Shokhrukh wanted to say.
Or Shokhrukh, please. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Matteo, for very interesting and well questions. On the first one, indeed, this is very interesting, and maybe I can brief you up on how it looks like and how it's structured in Uzbekistan, those kind of deals. If we discuss purely on the project basis, so the role of Ministry of Investments, and this role was delegated to us from very beginning, is that we provide support for any kind of investors. So that would be investors in the power sector, in the chemical sector, in the oil and gas sector, and etc. And the main beauty of those deals, and we need to understand why investors are so keen to invest in Uzbekistan, because the government, so MIFT on behalf of the government is creating, let's say, a special attractive regime for investors due to the agreements which are signed with investors on those deals. So I will give you a very simple example. On our deals with our private developers, there are two agreements. The first one is a power purchase agreement, which is very straightforward, where private developer generates the energy and then sells it to the off-taker, which is transmission company. Then we need to understand that Uzbekistan opened just recently for private investments. We need to understand that transmission company was established just 1-2 years ago. We need to understand that for now we are working closely with IFIs to develop an IFRS standards, to create a rating for the nego, and therefore we are in the process of reforms. And at this moment, the Minister of Investments, on behalf of the government, comes in and says, investors, don't worry, you have the government support. You have the government support agreement where MIFT, on behalf of the government, backups all the obligations of the off-taker towards you. So therefore, investors are sure that tomorrow they will be able easily to get their returns on the investments. Get their returns on the investments that they brought up to implement the project. This is the role of the Minister of Investments. On the Minister of Energy side, their main role on these deals actually is to create a proper legal framework for developers and to coordinate the activities of those three companies, which is transmission company, generation company, and distribution company. The role of Minister of Energy is to coordinate the whole process, review the process, understand the gaps, the problems and issues, and based on that to create the legal framework. So therefore, what you have three entities. You have the transmission company, which goal is, and the function is to buy the energy from the developers. You have the Minister of Investments that backs up the purchaser and gives separate support to developers. And then you have the Minister of Energy who overviews this process, finds the issues, problems, gaps, and creates a proper legal framework to, to make the life easier and to make the country attractive for the developers. This is how it works. Before moving to the next question, I would like just to understand whether my answer was sufficient and it covers your concern.
That was very clear indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure. On the next one, indeed you are right. We have, let's say, two type of transactions. First transaction type is done based on the tendered process, and the second one is done based on the bilateral negotiations. For the first one, I believe this is very transparent. This creates a competitiveness, and this is how the majority of the countries are doing to get the lowest possible tariff. On the second one is more related to the government-to-government relationships. As you know, we are now opening to different countries. We are trying to establish a good cooperation and a good relationship with different countries, and therefore the leadership of different countries are agreeing to have some bilateral contracts with the companies that they oversee to enhance the cooperation between the countries and to enhance the relationship. And therefore, on that basis, the projects with Total were found, the project with Masdar and Power came out to Uzbekistan. But moreover, we should not forget that this relationship is also dependent on the conditions which are provided by each party. And when governments agree on something with each other, definitely the understanding is that in the first place, the conditions should be satisfactory to both parties. And I can confirm that the conditions of the project that were signed on the bilateral basis are sometimes better, but sometimes are equal to the conditions that we would receive in the tender deals.